Today, we are diving into the story of a creature that just completely rewrites the rulebook for what's possible for life on Earth. Seriously, this story challenges everything we think we know about the natural world. So let's get right into it.
So, if I ask you to picture a giant prehistoric predator, you're probably thinking of a T-Rex, right? Or maybe a megalodon. But the answer to this question, it's not a dinosaur and it's not a shark. It's something way, way stranger. And its story doesn't begin with a roar, but with a tiny clue found deep inside the earth.
Our story kicks off in a place you would never, ever expect to find a monster. I mean, forget what you see in the movies, ancient jungles or deep oceans. This discovery was made in a massive coal mine in Colombia.
Okay, so picture this. Paleontologists are in Surahan, Colombia, carefully digging through these layers of rock. They're looking for fossilized plants, trying to figure out what the world's very first tropical rainforests were like. But they were about to stumble onto something that was definitely not a plant.
Deep in the rock, they find this weird, oversized object. It's clearly a bone, but from what? The team was just stumped. Some people were guessing it belonged to an ancient crocodile. Others were thinking, maybe it's a piece of a giant turtle shell. Somebody even thought it might be part of a fossilized tree. Nobody had a clue.
The fossil's true identity wouldn't be figured out until it traveled thousands of miles away, all the way to the Florida Museum of Natural History. And what they discovered there? Well, it was going to change everything. Just try to imagine that moment of discovery. The researchers take the mystery bone and they place it right next to a vertebra from a modern green anaconda, which is already one of the biggest snakes alive today. And the difference? I mean, it was just staggering. The fossil was 3 times larger and so much thicker. And right then, they knew. This wasn't a crocodile, it wasn't a tree, it was a snake. A snake of impossible size. So, using that one vertebra as their guide, the scientists started running the calculations. And the result they got back was just almost unbelievable. The snake that it belonged to would have been up to 50 feet long. That is nearly twice the length of the biggest anaconda ever found.
To help you picture that, just think about a city bus. This creature was longer than that. It's a scale that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
And believe it or not, the length was only half the story. The team estimated its weight at around 1,200 kilograms. That's 1.2 tons, more than 10 times heavier than a green anaconda. This ancient reptile weighed more than a car. And this incredible weight, well, it brought up a whole new puzzle. A creature this heavy would have literally been crushed by its own mass on land. So how did it even exist? Well, the answer wasn't just in its biology, but in the world that it lived in. You see, the discovery of this giant, which they ended up naming Titanoboa, meaning titanic boa, didn't just reveal a new animal. It opened a window into a completely different version of planet Earth. Now, here's the absolute key to understanding its size. Snakes are ectothermic, cold-blooded. All that means is their body temperature and their metabolism are controlled by the world around them. So the rule is pretty simple. A hotter planet fuels a faster metabolism, which lets an animal grow much, much bigger. Titanoboa's massive size was basically proof that 60 million years ago, its rainforest home was incredibly hot. Scientists calculated that the average temperature all year round had to be at least 32 degrees Celsius. That's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This constant, sweltering heat basically supercharged its metabolism, letting it grow to that titanic size. Okay, so we've got a 50-foot, 1.2-ton snake living in a prehistoric super greenhouse. But what did a creature this massive actually do all day? How did it live? How did it hunt? Right, so its huge weight made moving on land pretty much impossible. Gravity was not its friend. So just like modern anacondas and crocodiles, Titanoboa had to be an aquatic ambush predator. It would have spent almost its entire life in these murky, swampy rivers, where the water's buoyancy could support its colossal frame. And this gives us a great idea of its hunting style. It wouldn't chase anything. No, it would wait, perfectly still, just submerged in the water for hours, maybe even for days. Only its eyes would be above the surface, waiting for some animal to come down to the water's edge for a drink. And when one did, bam! The attack would be explosive, and it would be final. Once it had its prey, Titanoboa didn't bite with venom. It would constrict. And according to biomechanical models, It could squeeze with a force of 400 pounds per square inch. So, what does 400 psi actually feel like? Well, imagine the entire weight of two full-grown African elephants concentrated right on your chest. There was absolutely no escape. The pressure would have stopped blood flow and shattered bones instantly. The end was terrifyingly quick. So, what's on the menu for a predator this large? Well, the other giants of its time, of course. Titanoboa shared its ecosystem with these huge, ancient crocodiles and giant turtles that could be up to 8 feet long. We're talking the size of a pool table. These were pretty much the only animals big enough to sustain the king of the Amazon.
So, let's recap. It was the undisputed apex predator. It had no enemies. It was perfectly adapted to its world. So, where did it go? Why don't we see these titans swimming around today?
The answer is really simple, and it's also kind of tragic. The world changed. The hothouse planet began to cool down, and for a cold-blooded animal that depends on external heat, that was a death sentence. Everything that had made it so successful suddenly became a liability. The cooling climate slowed down its metabolism, which meant its giant size was no longer sustainable. Its swampy habitat started to dry up, and new warm-blooded mammals started showing up as competition. In the end, Titanoboa was a specialist, you know? It was perfectly built for one very specific environment. And when that environment vanished, so did the giant snake. It was an evolutionary marvel that was simply left behind by a changing planet. And that leaves us with a final, pretty powerful thought. The story of Titanoboa is this stark reminder of the deep, deep link between climate and life. A shift of just a few degrees wiped the largest snake in history clean off the face of the earth. It really makes you wonder what the changes we're seeing today might mean for the titans of our own time.